Very cool episode today about decentralized thinking with Nico Maier and what it means to become a better human being by working on yourself so that you can help those around you. Another great episode. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Hard to Kill podcast, the go-to podcast for military, LEO, and EMS professionals, sharing ideas and experiences from around the world to make you hard to kill. Here's your host, Dave Morrow.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. I'm sitting down with Nico Maier. Nico is an author. Additionally, he spent many years coaching high-end youth athletes through his specialized training in cognitive development. And I had to get him on the show because he's written a new book. And you know how I am. I'm a curious kitten. And he mentioned decentralized thinking, and his book that's coming out is called The Decentralized Mind. And I wanted to welcome him on the show and give you some of his insights because I think you're really going to enjoy them. And I know I am. So, Nico, welcome to the show, buddy. And let's start with, dude, how crazy is it that we're talking right now, having not met each other, and then all of a sudden we're just talking about Australian Canadian relationships and going to be talking about your wicked book coming out? Like, isn't this a wild time to be alive?
Life is beautiful. And Dave, thank you very much for having me on. This is a pleasure. I find it fascinating that we met less than a week ago
Mhm.
and we've had maybe 20 minutes of conversation, and I feel like I know you. Like there's that connection there, and that's popping up more and more and more, which I imagine and also observe is a sign of the changing times that is occurring, where like-minded people are starting to find themselves more, which is beautiful. But the antithesis of that and the spectrum that it lies on, it means that there's also going to be more tension present because of the level of connection that's out there. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
Absolutely, as am I. So let's start with a little bit of background, man. Obviously, you're Australian. Love me, the
hmm
Aussies. Shout out to Andy Plimer. I have to give a shout out to my buddy who I was talking about. Every time he comes up, there's any kind of reference because he's literally like the reason why I'm in podcasting right now because he started his Rugby Coaches
hmm
Corner podcast way before I did, and I humiliated him for starting a podcast because I thought he was a super nerd. But thanks to Andy, so shout out to Andy. But obviously you're Australian and you've done a lot of cool things. What got you to where you are now?
So I'm Australian and I don't surf yet. So I just want to put that claimer out there.
That's like a
Yeah, I
Canadian
know.
that doesn't play hockey.
Exactly. I'm a decentralized Australian, if you will.
Cool.
So very blessed when I was younger to play a lot of sport. It's been a very big part of my life. However, the funny thing there is that I grew up borderline obese, and I was lucky inside of that the physical side of things wasn't a limiting factor for me due to my ability to develop skills at a very fast rate and to be very efficient. So even when it came to things like soccer, yes, I wasn't the you know fittest, most well conditioned kid running around the field. You think would be one of the key attributes of success. However, I could read the game and position myself really well and became a really good passer and distributor of the ball. That transitioned into swimming, it transitioned into basketball, it transitioned into hockey, it transitioned into netball. Like that's the typical Australian of we play every sport under the sun. And the skills that allowed me to develop from a acquisition standpoint and also a feedback mechanism standpoint of you're going to make mistakes and that's how you're going to learn was fantastic. And I was blessed to represent my state in baseball. Surprisingly enough, I was a catcher.
Really?
And in 2005, I had the opportunity to travel to America for a training camp with Major League Baseball team. Back then, they were the Florida Marlins. And I always had the dream of being a professional athlete. And I was like, oh my God, how good is this? And I get there, and it's that cognitive dissonance, just whole world collapses if you go, oh, I suck at this. I'm really bad. Oh my God, look at look at all of these other guys and look at how committed they are and how hard they work and how athletic they are. And it was the first time that I got in my own head and the story shifted, the perspective shifted. I wasn't the big fish in the little pond anymore. I was now out in the real world and I failed hard. I went into the biggest slump. Like honestly, the story is, and I know it's inaccurate, but it felt like I didn't get a hit for a year. I came back to Australia, and where I'd made the New South Wales country team the years before, I didn't make it this next time, and I was distraught. And I remember sitting there on a Monday morning, and mum on one side, dad on the other, and just crying my eyes out. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I really wanted this, but I'm not good enough, and I quit. I honestly quit. I used excuses of I'm going into like senior school and I want to get a job. I'm getting to that age. I don't have time for it anymore. And I walked away from it. And thanks to the cognitive development tools that we'll go through today, I was able to reframe that, rewire it, and now reinforce a new story where I look at it and I go, okay, no, I saw the truth and I was able to make a choice where I then stepped more towards what it was that I wanted, but I didn't know what that would look like at that point in time. So I went into a rabbit hole and a very negative cycle on the back end of that of battling depression, anorexia, orthorexia, and suicidal thoughts. It completely broke my world. And I was very lucky to have the support system that I did. It got me into a love of health and fitness and this human development where I go to uni because I think, hey, I want to study nutrition. Like I love nutrition. So I spent years studying that, became a dietitian, did a little bit of sports nutrition. Like this isn't the thing. And inside that time, I took a trip to Europe. And it was when I was over there that I had the space created. And I was like, okay, what is it that I really want to do? I started to read a lot of the greats and the classics and get even more into this cognitive development side of things. And I said, hey, I want to start a youth academy. Like when I get back home, I want to start that and support youth athletes who are in a position that I was to better prep them for the reality of what is to come. So I come back home, I start that, and again, my whole world just shatters. My very first client is an Australian schoolboy, so rugby league, one of the top tiers. He went on to then transition to gridiron, won 40 collegiate scholarships to go over and play gridiron in the States. My second ever client was an Australian gymnast who won gold for Australia. I had kids come on who were making state teams and that already, some who were in local teams and hey, I want to go on to compete at a higher level. And I'm grateful that now the business has been closed for 2 years and the kids that we had in it are still on the trajectory where they're making like the Newcastle Jets side, who's the national soccer team for the area and are playing on the national stage, like on TV when it comes to netball, and are transitioning into college and university, and they're on track to receive the degrees that they want.
Hey, let me just interrupt you for one quick second. I want you to be able to help as many human beings as possible, just like I'm doing here with the podcast. You can be somebody's freaking hero right now, but you'll likely never meet them. If you head to the review section of your podcast app, hopefully that's Apple Podcasts, go to this section, scroll down, go to leave a review and rate the podcast, leave a review, and let the power of the internet do the rest of the work for you. This is the way that other people can make the decision whether or not they want to listen in, get fitter, get healthier, and become harder to kill, just like you. So do your good deed for the day. Feel good about yourself that you're helping somebody that you may never know. You may literally change somebody's life just by doing this, man. It's huge. But it's so virtuous because you don't even know who that person's going to be. Wild, wild world we live in. So if you're enjoying this content, pass it on. This is the 30 seconds of good behavior that will inevitably come back to you in the future. So head to your podcast app, leave a review, and drop a comment. Really appreciate you listening. Really appreciate you subscribing, and keep on tuning in to some more episodes. All right, back to the show.
Well, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, I screwed that one up. No, I was just asking, what netball is that? Is that what we call handball here, or is that like a basketball
No,
type game?
so netball is similar to basketball. However, you can't bounce or run with the ball. It's kind of like you're stuck in the mud as soon as you catch it.
Okay,
And
all right.
there's three different sections, and depending on what position you play, you can only go into either one, two, or all three of them. It's kind of weird, but very aggressive for a feminine sport. A lot of
Very cool.
contact
Very
and
cool.
played on concrete. So
Okay, so let's just recap here. So you actually were on the Florida Marlins like A squad,
So
or
no. So
how'd that work?
came over for a youth development camp. We
Oh,
flew in,
okay.
myself and 20 other Australian boys, into Fort Lauderdale,
Yeah.
and we were over there for a period of about 6 weeks, where 5 days a week we'd be at the training facility going through. There'd be some Dominican boys and some what was the other, Cuban boys there as well, and we were all just intermingling, playing scrimmage games, doing training. And there were two boys from the Australian group that went over that got picked up, but they were by Boston. And then
Right.
everyone else, unfortunately, from Australia came back home.
Huh.
And the Dominican boys and the Cuban boys, man, they are phenomenal. I just sat there in awe.
Yeah.
They
Well, I
are
mean,
absolutely incredible.
I um I did a service trip when I was still teaching to Dominican Republic with a large group of um 15-year-olds from the high school, and the
Hmm.
town that we were in was it South? No, it's another, I can't remember the town. Anyways, the town was like its claim to fame was it like pumps out MLB players like crazy, and there's baseball diamonds everywhere, and
Hmm.
they're playing barefoot
Hmm.
all day without a regulation bat, without a regulation ball, and it's no wonder like they are just ripping up the baseball diamond and they're playing all day. How do you compete? Like I don't even think they're going to school. I think they just skip school
Hmm.
to play baseball all day. They have
Hmm.
statues of MLB players because they're heroes, right?
Hmm.
They're the guys that made it, and it's just it
Yeah.
was incredible to see like the level of commitment. Like we have a pretty high commitment here for hockey, like
Mm.
but it's not like you can only play it outside in the winter for a very short period of time. There they
Hmm.
play it all year round, 24/7. So you got there and you realized, wow, I need to elevate or I'm never going to make it here. And so you went home and you just kind of went inward and just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
It sounds like, but that was
Correct.
that was the impetus to make you start realizing, hey, like I wonder why that happened, and it created curiosity. And so my question, like you said, you started reading the classics.
Hmm.
What what were the classics? I'm curious.
I read War and Peace. I read a lot of Dostoevsky. I read a lot of
Really?
Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, I read a lot of Bukowski, and the book that made the most impact on me uh, was Alexander Dumas, The Three Musketeers.
Really?
Yeah,
How come?
at that point in my life, that was the book. It's the book that started to tell me these stories that showed a different potential of what was possible by a small group of people, and it opened my eyes and created a love, or sorry, I should say reignited my love for reading. So the reason that I've transitioned into writing, it's what I did when I was younger. Like when I was little, my imagination runs wild, and I would just sit there and write short story after short story after short story, or I'd be speaking with, people in my family, and I'd start talking about things, and like, you're going to be a commentator one day. Like you just don't shut up, and you love sport, and your imagination runs wild. And like as we'll get into with the conversation about the book, that was ripped out of me because of the memes of the time and what the viewpoint was of society, and the people who I put into positions of authority in my own life would tell me, "You suck at this. You're never going to make a career out of it." Like I had English teachers tell me, "You shit at writing. Like don't do it." And as a kid, it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to let that go." So there was a period of, it would have been about 6 years, where I did not write and I did not read. It was like, okay, this is not me. I'm not going to commit time to it. And then the Three Musketeers is what reignited the spark. And then I just devoured books, like devoured them. Transitioned more into a like fictional side of things, and then into self development, and then into cognitive development, human development, and yeah,
Hmm,
here we are.
fascinating. You mentioned that your teacher's like, yeah, you suck at writing, and now look at you, right? Like,
Mm,
I had something similar when I was in elementary school, and you said you were, borderline obese, like chubby kid. Me too. Like, all through elementary school, like I was always big and just chubby, and it always affected myself, my self confidence and the way I looked at myself. And I had a gym teacher that said, and this is in the '80s, so you could say this, right? Like,
mhm,
Dave's too chubby, and likely he'll never excel at sports, and that's why he can't do pull ups and push ups and like follow along with the rest of his class.
mhm,
And I remember reading that, and it was just like a gut punch. I was like, oh, I'm like, as much as I was like, you can't say that, like that's not right. I was like, she's right, like she's bang on. So shout out to Miss Carr
mhm,
for
mhm.
writing, because I remember that was like in grade like 5, and then grades by the time I hit high school, so grade 7, I was
Mm,
6 foot tall. I was skinny as a beanpole, and ever since then, like I always had a culture of fitness and health
yeah.
because my father ingrained it in me. I just, this, I'm here now. I'm running a health and fitness podcast company. Like
Mhm,
it's always been something that I just want to prove that no, like
mhm.
I can do 20 pull-ups. I can, serve with the big boys in the military. Like it was just
Yeah.
that motivating force that from that negativity. It's amazing what, a little bit of negativity can do if your mindset is
Mhm,
right. So that's going to be my next question to you. When you were working with young athletes,
mhm.
elite athletes, what is something that you would typically do on the cognitive development side in order to either, I'm assuming they're coming to you not necessarily because they have a problem, because they want to get to the next level, or maybe they do have a problem. Maybe I'm mistaken, but what would you typically do with an athlete that's like, all right, I'm coming to see you. Obviously, I want to improve on this one thing. What are some of the things you end up doing?
Surprisingly, it was just a lot of love and a lot of listening. Like it was
Mm,
creating space for that. And what we observed is that in those athletes' lives, everything was always so structured, and they created so much pressure for themselves because of the ecosystem that they were in, and they were perceiving things certain ways and creating that, in a sense, let's call let's call it structure, that they felt like it was going to break because they were trying to hold on to it. And we all know that if you don't let chaos in, chaos is going to come anyway. So it would be sitting there to have that conversation with them and to let them essentially break in a safe environment, and then we can start to rebuild them back up, so they can have the moments where they're venting and they're talking about their fears and what they're scared of, and they're just getting it all out, because they won't do it with their parents because of the relationship that's there and how they think that that's going to, you know create and change the dynamic of the relationship. And what are the parents going to say? They're probably going to tell them to harden the fuck up and, don't worry about it, and not respond to it in the best way. And the same with coaches, like their sport specific coaches. They didn't want to show that side to them, so they didn't have an outlet. So that was honestly the main thing. Like that was the core, and from there we would reframe, rewire, and reinforce. So a lot of it would come down to beliefs about self. It would come down to confidence. It would come down to stories that they told themselves about the past that they were still carrying to this present moment, thinking that it was going to project into the future and impact future performance. So it was very multifaceted and multivariate. However, the core to it was pen, paper, words, and breath. It was very individualized then to the individual athlete that was in front of us. So, for instance, utilizing the example of the Australian gymnast, she was absolutely freaking incredible. Like, just so much raw talent. However, her sport specific training environment was very negative because her coaches had learned from their coaches and coaches
Right.
before that in that sort of environment, you need to be hard and you need to keep the quote unquote, hand around the neck at all times. And that wasn't how she thrived. She needed a more feminine approach. So bringing that in and starting to show her and help her see that, hey, you are in fact incredible, and the coaches, what they're saying isn't truth and it's not reality. There is more to this, allowed her to then be freer. So when she went into competitions and training, she showed up differently. Inside of that, she chose things differently. And inside of that, she created a different response and a different reality for her, and she created better outcomes.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Yeah, having taught for better part of a decade in the military and in high schools, you get to realize that although I don't necessarily agree that there's different learning styles, there's definitely different ways to communicate with a human
Mm-hmm.
being. And like in my case, I thrived in the military environment when I was told like, "Hey, like smarten up. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's not the way you do it."
Yep.
And I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, Roger. Yeah, okay, got it." And
Mm-hmm.
then that would super motivate me. Like somebody that was like torquing me, I'd be like, "Yeah." But the odd thing is, as I've gotten older, that's kind of changed a little bit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want the, hey, you know what? You are doing really well, man. However, there are a few things that need adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how that approach has kind of changed as I mature and I gain a little wisdom and like understand myself a little bit more. But that the instance you bring up with the elite level gymnast, that's really cool to hear because I know, having been a coach and having seen coaches in the past, like it's easy to get stuck in like one way of coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we're like hard style. We're just we're barking out orders, and I guess for a lot of coaches, especially if they're at a higher level, they'll see results. They'll get into
Mm-hmm.
like athletes to a certain level, but they won't provide any nuance in between because, at least from my experience as a teacher, when you start doing nuanced approach and you have let's say 30 people in the class, it gets very time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
um, so in your case, I'm guessing you would be that individual that would provide kind of like that ray of light, and like you wouldn't interact with the coaches, like they would do their thing, but you would provide them, like you said, like space to kind of breathe a little bit. And I bring up breath because you mentioned breath, um, and now that's kind of my new jam. Like that's my new thing that I'm starting
Mm-hmm.
to explore. Why breath? Why did you incorporate breath work and breathing as part of your practice with your athlete?
It changed my life and created the capacity for me to go on and change my life. Are you familiar with Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning
Yes,
and the
although I
quote?
haven't read it because literally, like I would say, like 25% of people come on this podcast always mention it. I'm like, yeah, I should
Yeah,
definitely read that book.
yeah, that's a sign from the universe. But
Yeah.
it's from the quote that between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies the power for one to choose one's own response. And it's like, okay, cool. In that space, we can take a breath, and that breath can change everything. If I breathe into the belly and I breathe low and slow, I can start to bring in my down-regulated parasympathetic nervous system, and I can pattern and interrupt the way that I would normally respond to this specific moment or this stimulus. And if I'm now responding in a different way, I can create the space to see things differently as well. I can feel the different energy in my body, or I can feel the present energy in my body, and I can start to create a new response. That's why breath was so important. If we had a child in front of us, and even let's say that it's a competition state and they forget a piece of equipment and they start to immediately go stressed, and the story's like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, I really, really need this. We can go, no, no, hang on a sec. Let's change our state with the breath. Let's breathe into the belly. Let's get a longer exhale compared to the inhale. We then start to bring our focus back to something that we could control instead of letting the mind do what it loves to do and just run like a hamster on a hamster wheel and go into a negative spiral of, you know, negative emotions,
Mm,
create that sort of cocktail, bring ourselves back to the present moment, say, hey, it's okay. I got this. I don't need that. It's not essential. I'm okay. I'm good. What can I focus on and what can I do now instead?
beauty. Um, it's funny because when we train to go overseas, and when we train, I was an infantry soldier, so we train tactical shooting. And
Mhm,
one of the things that I learned there before I did any of this on the fitness and health side of things was box breathe.
mhm,
And I understood why we were doing it, because we had some good instructors that like, you need to regain your prefrontal cortex, because in a very
mhm,
stressful situation, you are dominated by fight, flight, freeze. You don't want that. So you need to regain your breath. So it was engage the target, scan and breathe. And we would like have to say it
mhm,
out loud to like make it connect. But it was
mhm.
basically 4 seconds in, pause 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and like do it as and forcefully push out that breath so that you
Mhm,
can get rid of the tunnel vision and stuff like that. And it's just fascinating how everything kind of comes full circle. Like, this wasn't something that the military invented. This was something that has been known for a while, to be able to regain
yeah,
focus and to be able to carry on. And it's applied almost everywhere. And you just mentioned it here.
mhm,
Regain that breath. That's what you control. That stops your mind from spinning. And I was just talking about this with uh, the last guest that I had on, about just being able to put some, like, it's like a standoff distance from your everyday through breath
mhm,
work, where it's not it's not like a cure all for the things that ail you, but what it does allow you to do is allow you to be in that level of control where something bad can happen, but you can be like, okay, what am I feeling right now? All right, I'm feeling stress, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling,
mhm,
but now you're able to kind of put it into context rather than just
mhm,
live in that chaos, which is
yeah,
really cool. So, um, I want to now get into the book, and
mhm.
now we've got an idea of how you got to where you're now putting all these things down on paper, even though you were told you're a shit writer.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Ratcliffe,
yeah, there you
for
go. Like,
for likely having a bad day because you were an absolute gem, and on this one day, something obviously happened in your life,
mm.
which forced you to show up differently at school and to say to me, "You're a fucking shit writer." So
Yeah, there
thank
you
you.
go. There you go. And God knows how many interactions I had with my students over the years, right? That
Mhm,
I don't remember, but who knows? Maybe like, I'm a human too, and I definitely had some
yeah,
shitty days. So hopefully, it's motivating you guys out there, you Loyola boys that I happen to come across during my years there. But your book, The Decentralized Mind, this is what piqued my interest, because I've now gone down this rabbit hole of why things are l- likely going in the direction of decentralization, as a like on
mhm,
a macro level. Why I'm interested in this decentralized kind of philosophy, if you want to call it, but I don't have a granular understanding. I just have a feeling, and I've listened to some stuff. And I mentioned in our communications that I watched something about The Fourth Turning, which is
mhm,
a book. I can't remember the author's name, but it pinged me because I follow Tony Robbins, and he was on a Tony Robbins interview, and I thought it was just fascinating. And then we were on a random networking call, and then you start talking about decentralization, and I mentioned in our email that I now have a very strong, shouldn't say affinity, but appreciation for whatever the universe is trying to tell me, and energies that kind of
mhm,
unite. And I don't have a good enough grasp of what that is, but I seize on opportunities when I see them. And I definitely wanted to talk to you about this. So
mhm,
if you'll give me the permission, I'm just going to read just two things from your website about your book, just to
mhm,
kind of give it some context. So these are the things that this is what stood out to me. So, instead of creating liberation and sovereignty from the centralized structures of the world that keep us in a state of pseudo safety and pseudo security, we fight for the very structures that limit us and keep us fighting our potential. The world in which we live focuses and forces our attention out there, in quotes, distracting us with the thought that we'll find our answers there, when in truth, our answers are in here, and we, in fact, are our own saviors. I read that like
Mhm.
4 times. I was like, holy moly, like this is like religious almost. So let's use that as kind of like the context of what you're writing about. Like, this is heavy stuff, man. Like
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
like where do you want to, like, where are you going with this, and what inspired you to put this book together?
So the context that frames all of this is that when we say decentralized, we talk about simply taking back control from a centralized structure that's had so much power and that has control over the narrative, over the meme, over where attention goes, over what we're told is what's right, what's wrong, all of these laws, all of these rules. So you can look at it and you can say that in a social media sense, in a media distribution sense, the centralized power is like a Facebook and Instagram, a TikTok. It's where everyone's attention is. So how can we decentralize attention back? What I am asking people to do is decentralize it back to themselves and be a sovereign individual that stands aside unused by the world. So chaos can happen around, but we have the ability as individuals to think for ourselves, to discern truth from it, and to be able to look there and go, okay, cool. I'm not going to allow myself to get caught up in this because it's all a bunch of manipulation, fabrication, lies, pseudo truths, half truths, and it doesn't concern me. I can't control that. I'm not going to find anything out here because I don't control any of it. If I want change out there, I need to change in here first. So instead of giving our attention and our focus out on the world around us, let's change the internal state because we know the external is a reflection of the internal. And then it goes on to state that there's 7 core reasons that we do not do that. And we need to solve those problems. And those problems are solvable because every problem is solvable as long as it doesn't fight a law of nature. The thing that solves that problem is new knowledge. And we as humans, it's the thing that sets us apart from everyone else, every other species. We create new knowledge. We learn from other people. We formalize new ideas inside our head. We then put it into practice. We make mistakes. Evolution is error correcting and self correcting. We take that new piece of information and we make a new choice in the future. So, the thesis is that these 7 core problems exist, they're all solvable. Here's the reasons that we don't solve them for ourselves, but here's how we can, to then go on and be liberated from what is, create our sovereignty, and live life as we choose it.
Hmm. One of the parallels here is I was a teacher because, and let's actually rewind. I joined the military because I wanted to have an impact. I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm 19. Yeah, I joined the military. Learned a
Mhm.
lot there, and then I realized I'm like, I want to have a deeper impact on society. So I became a teacher because I wanted to solve problems. But again, too young. I'm like, I don't really know how to solve anything, but at least I could do this, and I could teach
Mhm.
science. Ultimately, I was looking at big order problems. Like, I was like, man, we're we're doing some damage to the planet. How do we start thinking about things from a bigger
Mhm.
perspective? And I was like, okay, army was the first step. Teaching was the next step. I'm like, a little bit of headway here. But then I was like, wait, hold on a sec. I'm like, you can't fix a problem on a macro level and just try to, like, that ends up being kind of totalitarian. And then I started
Mhm.
understanding that a little bit. And then I started rationalizing that, well, how can anybody really tackle large scale problems if you as an individual, you're sick, you're unhealthy, you don't have good social networks? Like, a higher order problem is so intangible. You're not going to go try and help and fix because you're not good. And
Mhm.
I learned that because I wasn't good for a while, and I had no, I was just focused on, you know, getting better, and I didn't care about higher order things. I went to work, but that was about it. I had, I just started a family. I was like, okay, these are the only things I can worry about now until I started feeling better. And that's why I wanted to convey that message of, being healthy is critically important to making the entire planet healthy. And I think that's what you're conveying, right? Like you need to look
Mhm.
inward before you can look outward and try to fix things. And that has been like the last 3-4 years has been like the driving force. Like if I can help the individual be physically healthy, okay, now you can go and do your thing. And that's why I want to work with veterans. That's why I do work with veterans, because I think we have a lot of capacity, but a lot of us are
Mhm.
struggling physically, psychologically, so that we can't thrive. And if we can get us thriving, we have the capacity to do a lot of good. So is that kind of
Mhm.
what you're getting at? Like there's that internal struggle that you need to be self-aware, that you need to fix the things that are busted or that need fixing, so that you can go on and be a really productive member of your society and planet.
Yeah, it's like I'm a big fan of first principles and
Mm,
just bringing things back to what they are. And on a first principle level, it's you don't control anything outside of yourself. So why waste time and energy on trying to do it? So, like, a context is that let's say that there's people out there who want to bring about change on a bigger level, and they're focused outside of themselves on we want to change these laws and we want to change this and we want to change this and we want to change this. And it's like, now hang on a sec. Instead of getting together as a group of 1,000 people and trying to physically force the external world to change, imagine if you as individuals all changed yourself first to be the type of person who can create that world and create that change. And then you changing yourself was the catalyst for other people around you to then be like, oh, that's possible. So they all then go and change themselves. And then now we have a compounding effect where there's 10,000 people who all show up a different way and believe a different thing. And now we're starting to get into a discussion about memes and how the narratives would then change because people start to see a different reality because other people are living that way and they see that it's possible. And now we start to generate change. So we haven't changed anything externally to begin with. We've changed ourselves internally first to show up a different way, which then provides a platform for the external reality to change with time.
mm, fascinating. When you
So
mentioned,
whether that's health, whether that's wealth, whether that's career path, whether it's religion, those sorts of things, government states, laws, if people sought to control the things that they can control and make those changes first, they would find it easier to respond to reality, to see what's actually true, and then to be a light for other people to change themselves so that then the change that they want to see externally can be created.
yeah, okay, yeah, I'm tracking. That's really cool. Essentially, what we taught in the military was lead by example. Like you want
Yeah.
a change to happen, be that change. Like be that person that is leading from the front, that is
Mm,
exemplifying exactly what needs to happen.
mm,
You also mentioned memes. Now,
mm,
my rough understanding was that memes were just like an internet thing. But in
mhm,
actuality, and correct me if I'm wrong, this comes from, is it Richard Dawkins with the selfish gene? Like he created this term because it's a
mhm,
it's culture that shapes the narrative, and that I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it uses gene theory because
mhm.
it consistently evolves based on the culture. You can have, I'm sure, a better discussion about that. What is a meme as like scientific as possible? What does it mean?
So to to set the foundation, what Richard Dawkins has done here is he had the idea in the abstraction of something, and he needed a physical representation of it for people to understand. So he has coined the term meme because it is like gene. So there's the association. I know what a gene is, so I can create an association for what a meme may be, which is a replicator. Just as genes replicate information internally when it comes to physical side of things, a meme replicates information externally as it pertains to cultures, societies, narratives, understanding the stories we tell ourselves about what's possible and about the world. And what you then go on to find is that these memes, in order for them to replicate, they need two things. They need something that is interesting and easily remembered, and they need a physical behavior tied along with it. And now, after replication, 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 it starts to get ingrained more and more, which means that the meme is harder to break and to
Mm.
shift. So this is why there are certain memes in cultures that have stood the test of time. They haven't always existed that way because they had to be created at some point, but people take them as truth. This is just the way that it is. This is how we do things here. And it's not until a new meme comes along that that old meme will be broken. However, for the new meme to take the place of the old meme, which is so deeply reinforced and so deeply ingrained, first it needs to be interesting enough for me to want to tell you so I get a little bit of status out of it, but also interesting enough for you to hear and go, oh, that's really cool. And then it needs to be simple enough for people to understand it so it makes a jump to universality and everyone goes, yeah, I know what this means. And then it also needs a behavior for people to physically represent. Like that's why it's so hard. You look at the education system and we had that discussion at the beginning
Mm.
about, hey, all of these people say we want to create change in the education system and teach kids how to think and not what to think. But you think about the education system and why it was really created, and it's got how many decades of the same stories being told and imprinted in people. So you think about, in order to change that, how much of an action potential there is going to need to be from what we call a rational meme, a meme that is dynamic, that is ever changing, that fights more for potential more than it does for limitation and shows truth. It has to have all of those four things in order for people to pick it up so that it can make that jump to universality. If not, people are just going to continue playing out the old, what we call anti rational memes, which are very static. So the anti rational memes can exist in a static society, which is quote unquote what we live in right now. It's not anti fragile, it doesn't like change, it's going to fight to keep things the same. But
Mhm.
we live in a dynamic world. Everything is continually in a state of flux. Everything is going through cycles. It's consistently changing. Yet the stories, for some reason, stay the same. And think about the moments where we get super close to breaking them. That's when those old memes fight the hardest. And the people who created them and enforced them will fight to keep them the same the hardest. And we are beginning to observe that at the moment.
Hmm. That's fascinating, man. I never thought of it from
Mm,
that context. That all those factors need to be in line for that meme to change. And I think most people understand meme from a very basic framework. It's like, oh, it's an
mm,
internet meme. Uh, so yeah, thanks for giving us a lot more understanding what that means. And I was having this conversation with my parents, my mom actually today, like, and my aunt, like, they grew up with a certain, I guess we can call it a meme around information. The
hmm
information that they got off TV and the radio was the truth. That was it. Like, they didn't have to search anywhere else. Like, why would I? I have, here at CBC News, or we didn't have to question it, but it was just reliable. I could see it was reliable because what they said actually happened. Okay, cool. We're good.
mm,
But we live in a world now, like you said, we're constantly in flux. Even if it comes from a reputable news source, is it actually legitimate? Yeah, like
hmm
my generation and the generation now that's growing up, we don't have that. Like, I'm a borderline Gen Xer, so I still have that like respect for authority at all costs kind of thing. But then I have that kind of rebellious side. But it's interesting to see that now you kind of have to question things, and
yeah,
I I applaud it because we've been kind of railroaded into only taking one source of information. But on
mhm,
the other hand, it also makes things a lot more easy in the sense that, like, do you really want to have to be thinking about all of your information that's coming at you as, like, is
mhm,
this coming from a foreign actor? Is there some other ulterior
mhm,
motive? So until those memes start to break and create a new paradigm, we're definitely in that period of like chaos and flux. And we talked about chaos earlier. I want to touch base on the in your book the seven core pillars or seven
mhm,
core reasons. Um,
mhm.
so obviously this must be the main framework. So what are they, like? How does that pertain to what you're talking about here?
Yeah. So the biggest problem, bringing it back to a adult cognitive development standpoint, is that there's Robert Keegan's 5 different stages. The first two are very uh, adolescent, and we get through them quite fast. But then we get to stage 3, which is the socialized mind, which is where we believe the memes around us. This is how the world is. And there are many humans who don't make the jump to the next level, which would be the self-authoring mind, where I create my own dogmas. Yeah. I see things as the way they are and I question them and I go, well, hang on a sec. This isn't accurate for all. So I create my own representation of what is. And that's beautiful, but it's still a stagnant level because I'm believing my own dogma, my own opinion, my own belief, my own experience, and I'm not searching for truth. I'm still not questioning things. I still have these two polarities of this is right and this is wrong, not just it's what is. So to make the jump to the fifth level, which is what they call the self-transforming mind, which is the decentralized mind, we need disconfirming information and just so much cognitive dissonance to say, oh God, I am wrong about so many things and that's okay, but I'm going to think for myself and be able to discern truth through it all. Instead of living in a land of representations and opinions and all of that, I'm going to search for truth and be able to hold two completely different ideas and see the power in both of them and go, cool. Now, what do I want to choose instead? So that's the framework that it lays out to support people to break out of the socialized mind and break out of the self-authoring mind. The example there would be socialized mind is I believe in CrossFit. I then go, oh God, there's more to this. There's also bodybuilding and powerlifting and all of those things. So I go to self-authoring and I create my own dogma. This is the way that it has to be done. This is how you have to eat. Instead of saying, hey, all of this is great. There's bits and pieces in all of this which are fantastic, and I'm just going to pick and choose what I want, and I'm going to let everybody else pick and choose what they want as well and what works for them, and not force my own ideals on people. So that's the framework that we're setting out. The 7 core problems that we face when we try to do that. The first is that we do not know ourselves. We don't. And because of that, we find ourselves in situations where we're doing things that we don't want, we're not standing up for what's right, or we're allowing different parts of ourself, which aren't our true self, to act and choose for us, which creates a misaligned reality. The second problem is that we don't know that we know almost nothing. And we have an abundance of cognitive biases and heuristics that create a representation of reality for us that isn't accurate because we are efficiency craving machines and it's really hard to think and process all of the information. So we have shortcuts to help us. So we just need to be aware of that. The third are the memes, the anti-rational memes that have created society that we take without a second thought and aren't accurate for life. The fourth is a war for our attention. Think about where it goes these days. Yeah, the media industry, social media, and what that's doing to us. How that's taking away our power, taking away our attention, forcing us on falsities and misrepresentations, and just creating these cocktails of negative emotions because of the impulsivity that it's creating and the want for dopamine and the comparison paradigms that it sends us down, and just this, let's call it a shit show, to be completely honest. From there, we then jump into the fifth problem, which is the outdated education system and the broken media systems. So you think about the education system in the transformative years and the stories that that's creating for these youths, and then they're being taught what to think, not how to think, and it's different in different cultures and different countries what kids are taught, and you look at that and you go, okay, well, there's a representation that it's obviously not truth, but it's truth for that culture, which is beautiful. But there's going to be keys here that we can support these kids to understand that's going to set them up to be better. And then the media system just reinforces and distributes the memes. And it's just in front of us all the time. And if we don't know how to discern through it, we're just taking it in and we're just seeing it everywhere. So it must be true. And to think for ourselves is very energy consuming and time consuming. So we don't want to do it. Then we get into an identity crisis that forms. We don't know who we are. We create these inaccurate identities for ourselves and we become who we think we need to be or we're told that we need to be and not who we actually are. And the final one is that we can't learn from history due to hindsight bias, due to survivorship bias, due to success bias, the fourth turning, things being cyclical, but we view them as linear. But all of those problems are solvable with the right knowledge. We can learn to understand ourselves. We can understand that we know almost no thing and that we have all of these biases and these heuristics and understand when they're playing out. We can be aware of the memes and when they're playing out in our life and go, oh, okay, cool. This may not be what is. I can choose a different meme. I can choose a different story and a different narrative. We can bring our attention back to ourselves and in here. We can start to shift the education and the media industry based on where we give our attention to. We can form a new identity for ourselves and we can learn from our own history and from history and the information that's there to then make better choices in the future and not repeat the same mistakes as individuals and as a culture, as a society.
Nico, you summarized the precise reason why I started this podcast, which was to break the established dogma around fitness and health. And you used CrossFit as an example.
Yep.
And I had this conversation with a buddy of mine. We're in a friendly competition. Shout out to Rob. He's like, "Hey man," he's like, "You're not gonna like why I'm getting like so strong right now on my deadlift." I'm like, "Well, go ahead, man. Like, you're not gonna hurt my feelings." He's like, I stopped doing CrossFit, man. It was just breaking me." I'm like, "Good." He's like, "Oh," I'm like, "Well, no. I mean, like, if it's not working for you, why would you keep on doing it?" He's like, "Oh, I thought you were a CrossFit guy." I'm like, "Well, I've used it. I like it. There's components of it that I enjoy, but I'm in no way a disciple that bows down at the altar." And that's literally why I have people with different opinions come on, so that the listener, can come up with your own paradigm based off of information that allows you and forces you to start thinking about nutrition, about health, and about all these memes that we've been told for 40, 50, 60 years, depending how old you are, that is truth. But if you look at your own health, is it serving you well? So that piece that you said, cognitive dissonance, is like,
Yeah.
that's like one of the single most important things, as to be human, is to look at information that's coming your way and be like, wait, hold on a sec, but this doesn't make sense, because this is the way it's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to lose weight when I restrict calories. How come I'm getting fatter? And then as soon as you're able to ask that question, then you start going down that journey of self exploration.
Yeah.
It's applied to like everything. We talked about school and how it's set up, and that's part of the reason why I'm no longer a teacher. I didn't see the system being able to bend like a willow tree. It's just going to break because it's not flexible, and it's not providing the institution in and of itself is not doing what it's meant to do, which is help the next generation be prepared for what's to come. It's it's a monolith, essentially stuck in another era. So, man, such a good conversation, dude.
The fascinating thing about like the cognitive dissonance is we don't want it as humans because it's
Really?
painful.
Oh,
Because
okay.
we'll think about most people, like if something were to come along and break their frame of reference, which is a gift,
True.
that they will fight it because no, like it's too dizzying for them. It's too unnerving. It's too painful. Just no. Like don't tell me that. So they will fight it. Where it's like no. If you let go in that moment, then you'll actually be better off for it. And yes, there will be a state of the unknown, and you'll have to learn things and start to see things a new way. But that there in and of itself is development. That's evolution. That's you being better. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's how progress is made the majority of times. It will be uncomfortable, but what's uncomfortable to you is completely different to me. It's relative, it's contextualized. And the easiest way to create a frame of reference and breaking it for ourselves is if it worked for everyone, then wouldn't everyone who did the thing have the end result? Like if it's not, then obviously it's not true. But there's a principle inside of it that is. So like in the health and fitness world, if keto was great for weight loss, wouldn't everyone who did keto actually lose weight? Yeah. but everyone doesn't, do they? No. So it's obviously not the keto. There's something else to it. And you go, oh, God, so what is it? I don't know. You tell me. It's probably the principles and the behaviors that they act out every day for a long period of time to do with simple movement, good nutrition, breath, time out in nature, hydration. It's likely those things,
Um,
and not the thing that you think it is.
yeah, on that point, I love referencing this study that came out of the States. They measured like all cause mortality for a cohort of firemen,
Hmm.
and the only thing that they could really statistically correlate was the ability to do 40 consecutive push-ups. And they're like, we can't really determine why 40 push-ups is the determining factor for a dramatic and significant decrease in all-cause mortality, but we surmise it's because their habits are conducive to being able to do 40 push-ups. So there's no one thing that they're doing.
Hmm.
They're fit. Like, so you are fit enough to do 40 push-ups. To do 40 push-ups is hard. You
Hmm.
can't just, if you're detrained, you can't just do 40 push-ups consecutively. Not going to happen. So you're clearly of the mindset that I need to stay healthy enough to be able to do this. So you're likely doing a bunch of things right. And I always refer to that study because it's a fascinating example of consistency is king. If you're consistent and you take
Hmm.
your health seriously, you will dramatically decrease things like all
Yeah.
cause mortality and just be healthier and be able to thrive. And
Mm.
that applies to, the cognitive space as well. If you're doing healthy cognitive habits that keep you in the game, keep you rationalizing things and
Mm.
looking at things from a different perspective, you will be a better, harder to kill human being.
Yep. And this is beautiful because when we form an understanding of how to solve those seven core problems, where the book ends is here's how to go and actually create your sovereignty. Because when you think about sovereignty, well, to bring it back, first principle, what people really want is freedom. Yeah, I want freedom from this or I want freedom to that. But essentially, in order to have that freedom and create that freedom, you need to be your own ruler. You need to know that I'm okay inside any situation. I can create what I need to create and not have to rely on anyone if I am forced into that position. Taking care of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, essentially what you want is wealth, health, happiness. Yeah. If I want my own sovereignty, I need to know how to generate wealth to the level that I need to live the life that I want to live. I need my health at a level that allows me to live, again, the life that I want to live. And I need happiness. So you break that down to first principles, you understand that wealth creation comes from leverage, it comes from equity, it comes from specialized skill sets, it comes from specialized knowledge, it comes from just these simple five different principles. And the same for health: daily movement in some form of capacity. Some days will be harder, some days will be easier. Great hydration, great nutrition, get some sunshine, get out in nature, get your rest and recovery, look after your language, look after your breath. You do those things consistently enough, and you learn to listen to your body. And I guarantee that in 10 years' time, you'll be in a much better, healthy state. It may not be fit, but you'll be very healthy on a total perspective that aligns with the blue zones of the world where people live the healthiest and longest lives. And then on a happiness standpoint, we need to collapse the distinction because a lot of people say, I want to be happy, but that's not what they're actually after. This is like, I want to be healthy, but what they really mean is they want to be fit inside of that. They don't actually want health. Happiness, when they say that, what they want is peace. Happiness is peace at rest, peace is happiness in motion. From there, you can say, okay, well, what is peace? And people say, I want my peace of mind. It's like, no, you can have your peace of mind any moment, but it's not going to create happiness for you. It'll still be fluctuating. What you want is peace from your mind.
Mm.
That is when you'll be happy. When this thing shuts off and you have peace from it, you'll sit here, you'll be present, you're not going to be worried, stressed, anxious, looking forward to things. You'll just be here and you'll have happiness because you have understanding. Happiness and peace come from understanding. When you understand things, you can then have peace from mind because you know either why they're occurring or you know why they exist and you're okay with it. So that's where the book ends. That's how you solve these 7 problems to learn to think for yourself and to discern truth from opinion, fabrication, second degree removed from reality and from truth. And then once you've done that, you then have the space to go, okay, now I'm going to generate the wealth that I want for myself, generate the health that I want for myself, and generate the happiness because everything else is taken care of.
Amazing. Dude, such a powerful message. Nico, how do people get a copy of your book and where they find all the information on it?
So they can head to thedecentralizedmind.com and they will be able to pre-order a copy. And we have a decentralized mind blueprint as well that goes with it, and they can download that for free if they want. If they get the book, it just comes with it because you need the thing, and I think it's fantastic. And inside of that, it breaks down these principles and these frameworks into very actionable tasks. There's going to be an application that goes with it that we're building out, as well as an audio series that breaks the book down even more for people so that they can look at this and they can have a physical representation and know what to do with it instead of just having it as an abstraction in their head. And then, as I said, we're building out an app. So the application is the easiest way to describe it is it's a journaling application because that's essentially what we're doing here in this process. This cognitive dissonance, this reframing, rewiring, reinforcing, it's a journaling process. It's processing the information, seeing things in a new light, reframing it using the words, rewiring it using the breath, and reinforcing it with deliberate practice and with habit. So the application, and there'll be a wait list on the decentralizedmind.com as well for this. We're simply after some beta testers. There's a daily prompt, like a daily journaling prompt for people, so that they can look at it and then go away with pen and paper and process through information. There's also going to be different sections in the library for them depending on if they want to clarify, if they want to simplify, if they want to reframe, if they want to shift their state, or if they want to process information. There'll be different prompts. And there's going to be an education component where we talk about vision casting, where we talk about language and architect versus conflict and projection versus reflection, affirmation versus negation, soft versus solid, and the roles that they play. There's a section on a 4-step process of how to work through old stories to reframe them and see them in a new light. That's the application that we're creating so that people can literally have the information there. And then every day, depending on what their intent is, if they'd like to journal of a morning or of an evening, before training, after training, they can literally go on and get the prompt and it prompts them. And then they turn away to their journal and they prompt and they process and write it out.
That's huge. So this is basically like getting your high level coaching in a much more affordable medium, and you can read it over and over again and take the actionable steps to literally improve your life moving forward. It's pretty
Yeah.
powerful, man. That's pretty
Thank you.
powerful.
Instead of focusing it like it's again, it's like using that if then question. If journaling actually worked, then wouldn't everyone who journaled have the outcome that they wanted? It's like, yeah, they should, but they don't for some reason. So there's something wrong with the journaling practice that most people have because what's the journaling practice that most people have been taught? Gratitude, morning pages. What are 3 things that you want to accomplish today? What are 3 things you did accomplish? Like it's all such superficial shit. There's no depth to it. Where it's like, hey, this process has power, but you need to actually journal about the right things. You need to have intent. You need to have a focus. You need to be asking the right questions. Because if you ask the right question, you will receive the right answer. So let's leave those things where they are because they are great. They're a fantastic starting point. But to drive the change and to see the results that you really want, you need to go deeper. And that is what the app will support people to do in a very, very simple standpoint. It's just going to be right there for them. As you said, it's high level coaching, like elite cognitive coaching, in the simplest manner that I can think of right now.
Right on. Nico, this has been really insightful. This type of information is hugely important for not just our community, but just people in general. So if you're listening, folks, share this episode widely. Let people know that this is something that, as an individual, um, you need to start getting a really good grasp on things. And in order to improve yourself, you need to start branching out just like a tree. And Nico's book seems like the perfect means to do that. So, Nico, thanks so much for getting on the podcast on a week's notice and chatting about your awesome endeavor and your book moving forward. And I think in the future I'd definitely like to have an update as to how things are going with the book and what other projects you got going on, because you're a pretty interesting dude and I'm sure you've got a lot more things to talk about. Any last parting words before we go off for the day and go pick up the kid?
I would just love to wish every listener a magical day, and thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for letting me talk about something that I'm so passionate about.
Right on, man. It definitely is conveyed in the words that you choose. And folks, don't forget, train hard, fight easy. Peace.
Mhm.